He's one of the most, one of the highest integrities of people, anybody I've ever really met. He worked for the IRS, Special Agent for the Internal Revenue Service. And one day he looked at the issues that the tax movement had been talking about for some time and couldn't really find a whole lot wrong with it, and asked his superiors about it, and they asked him to resign. And so he gave up, a nice cushy government job over this. But he was the type of person, once he learned the truth, he really could not look himself in the mirror and continue to be with the IRS if that was the case. And he was a special agent through the 1990s up to 1999, where he resigned. And I think you're really going to enjoy his story, and then we're going to take some questions as well from you. And help me welcome Joe Bannister.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ready to fall asleep after those burritos? Because there's quite a few faces that I recognize, any names, I'm going to kind of truncate the story so I don't bore you with yet another Joe Bannister story, but kind of go over some of the highlights for those who may not be as familiar with. And I'm supposed to speak for about an hour, and so I want to try to save as much time for just questions, not necessarily about me, but about tax issues, things you might encounter, whether it be from the federal government or the California state government. I packed up and left for Nevada about 6 years ago, so if that's any indication about how I feel about California, I give you some idea. But also want to embarrass my son, Robert, who's here watching his dad do a little speech, and his girlfriend, Ashley. It's really rare when family members are actually available to see old dad do his thing. So.
Well, you got support, that's great.
Actually, my family still talks to me, believe it or not. Anyway, back in the last century, 1993 through 1999, I served as a special agent with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, and got this handy little laser pointer. And this was a picture that was taken by the Palo Alto Weekly. I was asked by the East Palo Alto Police Department to help with a Citizens Police Academy. And I don't think it wasn't so much because they loved me, it's that I had this access to this $60,000 piece of equipment called a FATS machine. FATS is an acronym, stood for Firearms Training Simulator. And what it would do is it is a projector, really much like that over there, and it would portray on the screen scenarios, good guys and bad guys, also some bad girls on the screen. And so it was a demonstration, and that right there is a real 6-hour 9mm, just like the kind that IRS special agents would carry, but it was gutted so that it didn't shoot actual bullets, but it had a cord here that went down to a CO2 canister, so that the slide would rack just like it's supposed to, but inside was a laser, and it would have a laser pointer just like this does. And so that would register on the screen, so as you would shoot it, it would register your shots. And so these citizens were among those that would say, well, how come you gotta put 2 right in their chest and kill them? Why can't you just shoot the gun out of their hand and then everything will be fine? And so we gave them the opportunity, here's the gun, go ahead and try. And so of course they were shooting up at the ceiling and shooting their fellow citizens and anywhere but shooting the gun out of their hand. So it was really a good educational tool for why law enforcement people, if they have to shoot, why they put 2 center mass, 2 or 3 or more, depending on the drug level of the assailant. So this was actually a pitch dark picture or pitch dark situation, but the photographer was quite accomplished. Opened up the aperture, it made it look like there was lots of light on it in there, but there wasn't. I come from a family of terrorists. Over there on the far your left is my brother John. He's a lieutenant in the California Highway Patrol. Baby brother Jeff, he is an officer with the San Jose Police Department, been there for about 15 years. He might even show up here this afternoon to say hi. My mom, Ann, or our mom, Ann. My dad wasn't pictured in this picture because it was taken shortly after my dad passed away. He passed away in 1993, otherwise he would have been there too. My brother Jim, he's a battalion chief with the Daly City Fire Department. And then the pencil neck guy over there with the little treasury badge and pea-shooter gun. So that's a little family photo. My mom was quite disappointed in me initially because, as you can see, lots of banister badges and guns were going on there in the early 90s. And then Joe had to go and ruin the picture by trading in the badge and gun. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. Also, my Uncle Gary, brother of my deceased father, he spent 30 years with the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office as a deputy. So you can see we're just dripping with anti-government sentiment in the Bannister family, contrary to what the IRS might try to tell the public about me and my family. Anyway, because of the truncated time, I wanted to give you an illustration of something that I encountered while I was doing research, while I still worked as a special agent, something that really, really concerned me. And the reason I'm bringing this up especially is because, especially with Larry's talk this morning and his talk this afternoon, which I think you'll find will have a lot more application to the federal income tax in particular. But I thought you'd get an interesting kick out of this topic. I was a special agent in the IRS, okay? And we were, on my business card and in my employment documentation, the exact title of the division I worked for was called the Criminal Investigation Division. Just like that. By the way, this is a spreadsheet that I put together to kind of summarize. But it turns out that in the IRS rule book, it's called the Internal Revenue Manual, they actually have another organization within the IRS that's called Criminal Investigation. There's no division after it, it's just called Criminal Investigation. So you have two different groups, divisions that have a similar name, but yet a different name. Well, I don't know how many people have heard of something called the Internal Revenue Manual, but that is the kind of the Bible that IRS agents will use to determine how to pick your bones and steal all your property. No, I'm just kidding. To actually, go about doing their job. Truth is stranger than fiction. Anyway, so this Internal Revenue Manual, it's got the acronym IRM. So the reason that's important is I want you to notice that that says IRM 1132, and here's IRM 1134. So these are two different sections within the Internal Revenue Manual. And as I talk more, it'll make more sense. Well, in the IRM section 1132 series, they are going to describe, or they do describe, the Assistant Commissioner International. And they talk about the mission of the Assistant Commissioner International, the functional responsibilities, and then about the division itself. Down here at the 1134 series of the Internal Revenue Manual, you've got this guy or gal called an Assistant Commissioner Criminal Investigation. So you've got Assistant Commissioner International up here, and you've got this other person, Assistant Commissioner Criminal Investigation. Now, if you consider that this is kind of like a family tree, a hierarchy, notice how this Criminal Investigation Division answers to the Assistant Commissioner International. Wouldn't you think that a Criminal Investigation Division would answer to Assistant Commissioner Criminal Investigation? I would, but they didn't. Now, there's actually some descriptions down here, Criminal Investigation Mission, and some verbiage, which I'm going to show you, and functional responsibilities, which is similar to the kind of descriptions that are going on up here. Everybody follow me so far?
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to first talk about the Assistant Commissioner Criminal Investigation, which is this bottom section, this 1134 series. Well, the Assistant Commissioner of Criminal Investigation, underneath, see there's that again, and then there's this criminal investigation mission and functional responsibilities. So I'm going to blow it up a little bigger. Criminal investigation mission is to foster voluntary compliance and ensure public confidence through the effective enforcement of criminal statutes relative to tax administration and financial crimes. And then accomplishes the criminal investigation mission of enforcement of lots of prepositions going on here, of the criminal statutes applicable to income, estate, gift, employment, et cetera, by developing and supervising a planned periodic visitation nationwide programs. This is a lot of administrative and statistics and study. Now compare that, or remember that as best you can, to, and by the way, this is just to show you that before I left the IRS, I actually made photocopies of these sections. So don't just take my word for it. These are actual photocopies of the Internal Revenue Manual, and then you can see that designation, 1134.1, 1134.11. And this has the same verbiage as what I just showed you. All right, so now let's talk about that upper section, the Assistant Commissioner International. We have the various subheadings down here. Now this is 1132. Remember the other section was 1134. Now we're going to talk about, well, what does the Assistant Commissioner International do? And most specifically, since I was the special agent, what's going on down here with this Criminal Investigation Division that answers to this guy? Why is that? Again, showing you that there are these, I've created these descriptive boxes here, and we're going to go to where we can see them all. Now look at this. Criminal investigation administers the Internal Revenue laws and related statutes as relate to U.S. citizens residing abroad and non-resident aliens deriving income from sources within the United States. The Criminal Investigation Division enforces the criminal statutes applicable to income, estate, gift, employment involving United States citizens residing in foreign countries and non-resident aliens subject to federal income tax filing requirements. And do you notice, or do you remember how the other one that seemed to be about studying and programs and, it's all about like monitoring what's going on, but not actually doing it. Whereas look at how clear they are here. You're actually investigating. You're recommending prosecution. You're providing investigative resources. You're processing cases. This is the kind of work that I do. Working in the San Jose office, I started in San Francisco and was transferred down to San Jose. This is what I was doing. And I worked for the Criminal Investigation Division, and I'll show you. And by the way, so this is back, see the 1132 sections? This is right out of the Internal Revenue Manual. So Criminal Investigation Division, it enforces the criminal statutes applicable to income, state, gift, all the taxes, blah, blah, blah. But here, involving United States citizens residing in foreign countries and non-resident aliens subject to federal income tax filing requirements. Now this was, whenever I got promoted or whenever any IRS agent gets promoted, they have what they call a notification of personnel action. So this is one of my promotions that was effective as of January 4th, 1998. It's about a little over a year before I resigned. See my name over there? That was what I was. I was a criminal investigator. I was being promoted to a grade 12, step 2. There's the pay, basic pay, the premium pay. But look down here. I work for the Criminal Investigation Division. But didn't we just show you that by the IRS's own mouth, but with their own internal manual, my job was investigating all these things involving United States citizens residing in foreign countries, non-resident aliens. But they never told me that. They told me, hey, you got your gun and your badge, and you go to East Palo Alto, and you go to San Jose and Sunnyvale, and Yet that was very contrary to what their own manual said that someone, a special agent working in that division, should do. Big problem. So, as the IRS likes to do with people who look a little too deeply into how they operate, and again, I'm trying to fast forward this so we have time for questions. In 2004, November 2004, I was indicted on a whole bunch of stuff over here. The attorneys call this the birdcage area, so there's a lot of poop in that birdcage. I was accused with a client, Walter Thompson, of doing some very bad things, all listed up here. But to summarize, I was accused of conspiring to defraud the United States of America by helping my client to stop withholding from his workers' paychecks. And I was also accused of conspiring with my client to prepare false federal income tax returns. They were actually amended tax returns for him for 3 years. You see, Al Thompson approached me and he said, "Joe, I'd like to sue the IRS to try to get some of my money back from the past, because now I've learned that I'm not required to pay or file, and I want my money back." And I said, "Al, they're not going to give you your money back. You just shouldn't even bother." No, I want to try. I know I probably won't get my money back, but I want to try. I want the record to reflect that I went through all the procedures and try to get my money back. Well, naive Joe, the same one who was naive enough to go work for the IRS and think that they were doing the right thing, said, "Well, heck, I mean, the IRS lays out a process to go get your money back. You want to do it. You're already accepting, acknowledging the fact you probably won't get it back. What could be wrong with filing some refund claims?" Well, what was wrong with it is the IRS turned what was an absolutely to the T following of their procedures to get a refund back. They turned that into false refund claims and claiming that the two of us conspired to defraud the United States of America. Huge difference for what our intentions were, or what our expectations were. Well, November of 2004, we were indicted and arrested. I was arrested here in San Jose, actually, and was carted up to Sacramento. They were kind enough to cuff me in the front. Usually, all the rest of you are going to get like this. They gave me a nice bottle of water for the ride, and interestingly enough, I ended up having to give them directions on how to get to Sacramento. So it's kind of an interesting experience. Anyway, once you get indicted, if you have a good defense attorney, somebody like Larry B. Kraft, or in this case, Jeffrey Dickstein, they say, "Well, hey, we got to start getting prepared. So, Joe, what I want you to do is to send me all of your research." So I said, "Okay, Jeff, get ready." And that bill for that FedEx cost a pretty penny, believe me.
What about the bill for him to read it?
Yeah, that came later. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. So again, having to truncate, but just to give you the highlights of the trial, the prosecution tried to disqualify one of my two defense attorneys. You saw Jeffrey Dickstein pictured there. Robert Bernhoft was also my defense attorney, and they tried to disqualify Robert Bernhoft. The prosecution really had my best interests at heart. They said that Bernhoft was not qualified to represent me. So I chose Bernhoft. I thought he was qualified, but the prosecution didn't. And so they motioned the judge to get him off my team. Wasn't that nice of them? But when you're trying to prepare for trial, and 3 days before your trial starts, they're saying, "We're going to motion the judge to get half your defense team off." You end up having to focus all your attention on that rather than boning up on your testimony, and so it's a strategic, dirty trick that thankfully didn't meet its mark. Bob was kept on my team as I wanted him to be, and the judge rejected that motion, but nevertheless they tried. During the trial, a 28-year veteran IRS agent, an IRS revenue agent, an auditor, when he was on the stand, there's a direct examination when you're called by your side, and then there's cross-examination when you're questioned by the other side. Well, on direct examination, since he was a prosecution witness, he couldn't point out anything false in the tax returns. And remember, I was charged with preparing 3 false tax returns. And wouldn't you think, if there's this, horrendous charge of preparing false returns, they could find something false in those returns I prepared? But he couldn't testify to any. He basically talked generically about tax returns. It was really outrageous to hear him speak and speak and speak, and the jury's like, okay, well, when's the meat coming? When are we going to hear something bad? And they never did. Government witness after government witness, or actually prosecution witness after prosecution witness, couldn't testify that any conspiracy even existed. And they couldn't produce any documentary evidence that any conspiracy existed. Of course, that was no surprise to me because there wasn't any conspiracy. But the government still wanted to put me through this. The case investigator, Sean Breslin, he was one of my coworkers before I left the IRS, and he ended up investigating me. And so, of course, he had to take the witness stand, and he testified that he encountered no evidence that the IRS was impeded, impaired, or obstructed. That's what I was accused of conspiring to do, impede, impair, and obstruct the IRS. The defense, us, we only called one witness, which is my former IRS supervisor, Bob Guarini, as a character witness. Not one juror ever voted for conviction during any of the deliberation polling. You know how on juries they poll to see, do we have a consensus here? Do we have to go back to the drawing board? Well, the jurors that spoke to me after the trial said, no one ever voted for conviction for you. It was just a few people that wanted to see a little more evidence. But I thought that was compelling, that nobody said, hey, that guy's guilty. Nobody even formulated that in their mind throughout the deliberations. And one of the 2 prosecutors didn't even show up for the verdict. Now, Larry Beecraft told me, I think it's a suspicion of his, but they actually listen, the government may actually listen to jury deliberations. I don't have any proof of that, but take it with a grain of salt. All right, now I want to tell you another interesting thing about the trial that will really show you well, not only whatever efforts I've made to try to truly get answers from our government, but to show how evasive and what the government will do to avoid answering those questions. When I was working as a special agent, of course, an investigator they do an investigation, and that's supposed to lead to a prosecution if you actually accumulate enough evidence. And the prosecution is going to be one or more attorneys, right, that work for the government, a prosecutor. Well, this guy, Tom DeLeonardo, was a Department of Justice tax prosecutor. And we worked together while I was a special agent and doing my investigations. Well, after I left the IRS, you can notice the date on this email, April 17th, 2001. A couple of years, 2 or 3 years after I left the IRS, I was going into everybody know where 55 South Market is, I'm sure? The gold building where all the gold is?
To make sure it gets there.
I was going there on behalf of a client, and it just so happened that Tom DeLeonardo, this prosecutor I used to work with, was there, and he was leaving, and so we bumped into each other. And so Tom, shakes my hand, hey Joe, how you doing? And he says, it's really too bad that you've decided to leave your job and hang around with all of these greedy people. And I said, Tom, I'm afraid you've got me all wrong, and you've got the people that I hang out with all wrong as well. We're actually we're people of integrity. We have read the law, and we actually believe that there are some big problems with the way the IRS enforces and administers the law. Now, you think that, or you're accusing me of not being sincere and the people that I hang out with. But tell me this, since you work for the Department of Justice, how about if you go through your channels within the Department of Justice and find someone who will meet with me and with some of my friends, and we can have a meeting and you can show me where I'm wrong and where my friends are wrong. I think that that's reasonable. And the thing is, I've tried outside the DOJ to get some answers, but you actually work for the DOJ. So you could actually do things I can't do. So Tom, since you've accused me of being this really bad guy, put your money where your mouth is. Let's have a meeting and then you can prove it to the world. Well, This is back in April of 2001, okay, and I made that request of Tom, but after we parted there on Market Street, I never saw him again. As far as I was concerned, what I said just, went in one ear and out the other. Well, come to find out in my trial, there's something called the Jenks Act, and the Jenks Act requires that if there's going to be someone that's going to testify in a trial, any statements that they've made about the issue that's there in court have to be disclosed to the other side. So since Tom, unbeknownst to me, he put together an email to his boss. And I'm going to just give you a few of the summaries, but basically, see this guy, Ron Cimino? That's Tom DiLeonardo's boss. You know what he did for a living? He was in charge of the entire western United States criminal tax prosecutions. He was a big guy in the DOJ. Big. Very high up. And Tom also CC'd a couple of his colleagues, Jennifer and Melissa. And Larry Beecroft said he's actually run into these ladies in various tax prosecutions. Now, this is kind of funny, or I think you'll think it's funny. Part of what he said was, his, meaning my, associates are mostly notorious illegal tax protesters who would most assuredly be disruptive and uncooperative. Now, I've noticed that about you people here today, and you really need to clean up your act. You're very disruptive and uncooperative.
He spent them all, I assume.
Yeah.
Easy.
But to Tom's credit, he actually did what I asked him to do. He actually approached about as high up in the DOJ as you can get, at least in terms of criminal tax prosecutions. And he said, because he, referring to me, is currently the most highly publicized member of the illegal tax protester movement, it would serve the government well to show him the error of his views. At the very least, Bannister could no longer argue that the government has refused to show him the law. Now, can you imagine? You've got a DOJ prosecutor, pursuant to my request, going to his boss who runs the entire western United States criminal tax prosecutions and making that plea, that solicitation, not so much on my behalf, but on behalf of us crazy, uncooperative people, to try to give us an audience and show us the error of our ways. That seems like a pretty good opportunity, wouldn't you say, for the Department of Justice, who says that we're all just a bunch of jerks and don't want to pay our fair share, and on and on and on.
Did the Jenks provision allow the response that Ron might have given?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
So this guy, you don't have a reply to this email?
Oh, right. Well, okay, that's a good question, because basically what happened was this was disclosed to the defense during my trial just a few minutes before he testified. Now, Larry Beecroft said that the law actually says that this kind of stuff can be disclosed after the person testifies, but judges apparently throughout the country have said, look, it's not realistic to give this kind of information after the testimony. I want you to give it the night before, at a minimum. Well, they didn't give it to us the night before. They gave it to us 5 minutes before he testified. And I don't know how many people have been in a courtroom when you're on the hot seat, but I mean, things are happening like, quicker than Jeopardy. I mean, and to get that, it's like, whoa, you see what is just like a gift, a beautiful gift, but you have like 2 seconds to process it and do something about it. But anyway, the way that it was, what ended up happening was that we did get this before the cross-examination, where my side gets to ask him some questions. So of course we focus on this. And like, okay, you wrote this email and you said these things about Joe, and you appear to be saying, even though you're saying that he's, this tax protester guy, but you seem to be saying that he's sincere. So tell me, or tell the court, did you ever get a response from Ron Cimino, this bigwig at the DOJ? He testified, no, I did not. Never heard from him at all. Did you hear anything from Melissa or Jennifer? No, I did not. So you have a very respected trial attorney in the DOJ making that kind of an inquiry and request, and silence. Well, the jury heard that, And they're like, wow.